My only passions are integrity and honor. I welcome the end of your kind. The Jedi obsession with my people's extermination must end.
Hello and welcome to the Exalted March. Today we're going to be taking a closer look at one of my favorite scenes from Star Wars The Old Republic, namely a scene from Chapter 1 of the Jedi Knight class storyline. So if you haven't completed Chapter 1 from that storyline, be warned that there are spoilers ahead. This scene revolves around your Jedi Knight's confrontation with Lord Praven, a Sith on Tatooine in command of a superweapon that threatens to destroy the planet. I wanted to do a breakdown of this scene for a number of reasons, most notably because the content is generally subversive of established Sith archetypes that we normally see in Star Wars. We see a Sith, Lord Praven, behaving in a way that we don't typically see from Sith. And moreover, Lord Praven calls into question some of the morals of the Jedi Order in a way that makes you reconsider the ideals of the Sith. In other words, he isn't just questioning Jedi morals to be antagonistic, but instead his assertions suggest that perhaps it's the Jedi antagonizing the Sith. The scene also showcases subtle internal character conflict, something unfortunately underutilized in the Old Republic storylines. Most of the conflict in Old Republic is surface and easily discernible, but there's a nice bit of subtlety to Lord Praven that really makes you think if you watch and listen closely enough. Last but not least, there's a notably increased cinematic aesthetic value in this scene that unfortunately is all too rare in the Old Republic. Even in the class storylines, which pre-expansion packs were the premium storytelling quests in the game, the cinematic quality can vary significantly from scene to scene, to the point where even key scenes can devolve into static shots of the characters just exchanging dialogue. But this scene actually features some quality cinematic work, and we'll talk about how that cinematic value tangibly increases the impact of the scene's thematic content. We'll go through the scene beat by beat, and I'll call out some of the key elements that really make this scene work. Alright, so right away, right from the beginning of the scene, we see that we have this wide establishing shot. And the reason why that's important is because we don't often get establishing shots of any kind, really, in Star Wars The Old Republic. A lot of the times the greatest amount of width that we see in any of these shots is maybe like a full, and like I mentioned earlier, a lot of the cutscenes, maybe out of necessity or out of utility or just saving time, they really end up just being sort of like close-ups and half close-ups, and maybe occasionally you get a full shot to get multiple characters in there, but you almost never really get these wide establishing shots. And we'll see here in a bit with the shots that follow after this that this wide establishing shot is actually to build atmosphere and in some sense to build tension with the scene.
I sense your power. Now I understand why Tarnis was no match for you. His death was my failure. I should have trained him better.
The other Sith I fought were full of hatred and arrogance. In you, I sense regret.
My family is true Sith. My only passions are integrity and honor. I welcome the end of your kind. The Jedi obsession with my people's extermination must end. Your lust for revenge will destroy this galaxy.
Now that's a lot right off the bat, but I like it because it's succinct and it sort of compactly gives you an idea of who Praven is explicitly right away, but there's still a little more to delve into. But I mean, right off the front, Praven establishes himself as a very unique type of Sith. First of all, major props to the actor who's portraying him. I feel bad that I didn't look it up. I might find it and put it in the description below, but phenomenal job acting. The voice has gravitas and authority, but also a sort of calmness, which is essential to how the character is written. And your Jedi Knight character, it immediately recognizes that there's something different about Praven. Maybe she just senses his demeanor, or she feels it through the Force, but something is evidently different about Praven. And he says some really really key things here. And this is the beginning of what I talked about earlier when I said that he's not the typical Sith, and also that he calls into question some of the Jedi morals. Namely, he says that because he's pureblood Sith, the only thing he really cares about is integrity and honor, which is not necessarily the typical ideals of the Sith. But if you pay attention to some of the things that he says continually throughout the scene, perhaps integrity and honor aren't antithetical to the Sith either. Maybe those things do have something to do with Sith ideology, and he's already mentioned his ability to sense the Jedi Knight's strength. And maybe integrity and honor actually have something to do with strength, and in that way, maybe they're a little more connected to Sith ideals than we might have realized. Also, before we continue, just the fact that he questions the Jedi's lust for revenge is what he calls it, and he begins to plant that seed that the Jedi are pursuing conflict really as much as the Sith are, and we'll see here how you can respond to that.
Whatever you've been told about us, it's a lie. We'd gladly stop fighting if it meant genuine peace.
I'd like to believe that, but I know better.
Now, it's really important to know, if you're a classic Star Wars fan and you've played many of the games and read the books and watched the movies, your mind immediately jumps to, this Jedi is right, this Sith doesn't know what he's talking about, he's part of the dark side, and the Jedi are all about peace and love and compassion and forgiveness and all those good things, and they would gladly stop the fighting if the Sith would just surrender peacefully. Be careful to note that is obviously not true all the time. It would be naive to think that the Jedi actually operated in that way all of the time. And in fact, in about a minute or so, we're going to see that is explicitly not true all of the time. So just watch carefully, because that's a very important point. He says, "I don't believe you," and just kind of watch carefully how that thread gets completed later on in the scene.
Come, let us end this. Die well, Jedi.
They are good as new.
Such skill, so much power. Impressive. You could kill me. Why hesitate?
You could have killed the scientist and those Jawas at the shock drum facility, but you didn't.
They were not warriors. Their deaths would have been pointless. Darth Angral commanded me to destroy the shock drum code. He wanted you to die in failure, no matter the outcome here. I will not tarnish my honor with petty tricks. You've earned better.
This is a really, really key aspect of understanding the subtle internal character conflict, which I mentioned earlier within Praven. Number one, I do want to just call again, because it's a consistent part of the theme. He again notes the power and the strength of the Jedi. This is at least the second time he's done that, and he'll do it again, because strength and power are very important to him as a Sith. It's very important to note that when we look at Praven as a unique character, we're not simply saying, oh, he's really a light side character. You could easily make that mistake. You could even make the mistake of somewhat thinking he's sort of like a gray Jedi, which in some sense he is. That's not purely a mistake. I think that's a valid argument to actually think of him more as a gray Jedi than a Sith, or simply a light side Jedi. But it's actually not quite that simple either. Even that's kind of a reduction. It really is the fact that he's sort of like a noble Sith, because that's really what he is. He is adhering to a form of the Sith ideals that he finds to be most appealing, which is one that's very, very concerned with honor. But also with strength and with power, which are typical classic Sith ideals, but he views them in a different way. So that's very important that he mentioned the Jedi's strength and power again. But specifically, the fact that he disobeyed Angral, that he disobeyed Darth Angral, and your Jedi Knight gets to ask him about it. It's very, very key because, again, he is not, strictly speaking, just a light side character. Okay, that's very key, and we're going to see in just another few moments here why the fact that he disobeyed Angral is it's a key part of understanding the fact that he is in conflict inside of himself. Not just because he's a Sith who is supposed to obey Angral and he disobeys him. That's one level of it. Okay, he's a sworn Sith. He's fighting against the Jedi and the Republic, and yet he disobeyed his master, Darth Angral. That signifies some conflict, but actually not really, because maybe he's just decided to betray Angral. That could be another reason for it, and Sith do that in power plays all the time. If he was constantly disobedient to Angral, that wouldn't actually signify that much conflict. But look at what comes up here in a few moments and pay close attention to the dissonance between his obedience and his disobedience when it comes to Angral.
The code is yours.
You've done the right thing.
Darth Angral ordered that Master Kuix suffer greatly before her death. I wish I had disobeyed that order as well.
That is a really key moment for Angral. It's well written. The acting is on point. And it maybe gets close to being somewhat on the nose because he actually says, "I wish I had disobeyed that order." But if you apply some mindfulness when you watch this scene, you see an instance where he says, "I'm not going to betray my honor with petty tricks. I'm going to disobey Darth Angral because I think it's the more honorable thing to do." And remember, I can't state this enough, it's not that he's just trying to be a good character. He's interested in strength and power, and in his mind, petty tricks don't play into strength and power. So it's not just that he's good, per se, in the traditional sense. He is a Sith. He's concerned with strength and power, but his version of strength and power does not include petty tricks, and it also seems like it doesn't include torture, because as we begin to learn, that's essentially what's happening to Master Kuix, because Angral wanted her to suffer before she died, and he says, I wish I had disobeyed that order also, and you can hear the regret in his voice. So we have an instance, we just saw it, he's willing to disobey Angral and not follow the orders of his superior within the Sith Order because of honor, and yet in another instance, he did follow his orders, despite the fact that he now reveals that also kind of goes against his sense of honor. So there's great conflict in Praven. And I think, the fact that he said he wishes he had disobeyed the order, it's a little close to being, like I said, sort of on the nose, but the connection to all of his other actions, I think it's laid out clearly before the player, before the viewer, but it's not obvious. And it's those things that are not obvious that I think, if you are mindful of them, they do tend to resonate with you the most. And so I really enjoy the subtlety of that dichotomy between his obedience and his disobedience when it comes to Darth Angral.
If Master Kuix is still alive, I will save her.
I left her incapacitated next to your weapon. If they haven't already, the ultrasonic vibrations will eventually tear her apart.
You scum! You should die like that!
There is nothing more to say.
Now that is the moment that I was talking about earlier when Lord Praven said it's the Jedi's lust for revenge that keeps this conflict going, and the Jedi Knight has the ability to say, I don't know what you've heard, I don't know what people have told you, but no, Jedi aren't like that, and if the Sith would just, treat us peacefully, we would do the same. And although it's not instantiated in Jedi principles. Yes, the Jedi principles are about peace and forgiveness and not going to war, but it's naive to assume that those principles are adhered to all of the time. And I think it's really telling that Kira, who is with you, if you bring her along as your companion during this scene, because of her connection to her master or former master, or however you want to look at that, Master Kuix, this is someone that she cares about. And she says, you should die like that. She doesn't even just say you should die or you should be punished or you should, you deserve to die for that. She says you should die like that, which is a form of torture. She's essentially advocating the same form of cruel and unusual punishment, the same form of torture as death that Darth Angral, a Sith, ordered Praven to enact on Master Kuix. And Lord Praven says, I wish I hadn't done it. Meanwhile, Kira doesn't seem to have any remorse over shouting out that I wish you would die like that, being tortured to death by this horrible super weapon. That's very key. It's not, of course, it's not that those are the official positions and principles of the Jedi Order, but that someone who has been trained from a young age to become a Jedi, although she's still a Padawan at this point, could still succumb to anger and behave in that way. So when we look back on Praven's statement that I know better than to believe that the Jedi are all peaceful and they're all willing to just stop this conflict, think about the fact that he's already defeated. I mean, the Jedi have strict rules against not killing prisoners, and he's already defeated at this point, and Kira says, you should die that way. You should die being tortured to death. It really lends credence to what Praven was saying earlier, that he knows that not all Jedi could be trusted to simply lay down their arms and stop this conflict. I thought that was an incredible amount of synchronicity in something that was, the seed was planted earlier in the scene, and it really pays off there with that moment. That is specific to having Kira with you. Obviously, if you have T7 with you, you're not going to be able to make that same observation, but having Kira with you does allow for that insight into the Jedi, their imperfection, and Praven's recognition of their imperfection.
You won our duel. Finish me.
You may serve the Empire, but I won't kill you. You don't deserve it.
Then honor demands I surrender to my master. He will do what you cannot.
And then, of course, right away, as the Jedi Knight, you do have the ability, you have the ability to execute him, but you also have the ability to show him mercy, which is a balance to what you just witnessed with Kira. And that's what's interesting about it. It's certainly not that the Sith are correct and that the Jedi are all just power hungry and just as eager for war as the Sith. No. That's just that some of them will fall prey to anger and emotion despite the fact that they claim they don't do that. And other Jedi perhaps will at times adhere to the principles of forgiveness and peace that they espouse so greatly.
Jedi are taught to see all possibilities. I see one where you live on with honor. Commit yourself to the path of light. Become a Jedi.
Me? A Jedi? Impossible. Your order would never accept me.
Jedi believe in forgiveness, not hate.
Accepting a sworn enemy into one's ranks without fear. That is strength.
That is strength. And that is really, I think, the moment when Praven's character comes fully into focus, and it sort of connects all of the things that moment there is really the thing that connects all of the threads that are being drawn throughout this scene. He once again recognizes the Jedi Knight's power, their strength. These are the ideals that he has learned as part of being Sith, that power and strength are the be-all, end-all. That's the thing he's trying to get to the most. But he has already seen that strength and power, for instance, don't involve petty tricks. And he regrets the fact that his master, Darth Angral, thinks that it involves torture because he doesn't believe that. He believes in honor and an honorable duel. And he's now realizing that even mercy and compassion can be a form of strength, because he says welcoming a sworn enemy into your ranks without fear, that is strength. So he starts to recognize openness, willingness to cooperate with others, willingness to cooperate with those that were your enemies, compassion, forgiveness, mercy. These things also take great strength, and he's recognizing that. And that is, in some sense, undoing some of the doubts that he may have had about the Jedi Order. We just witnessed it, as I called out, with Kira saying you should die being tortured to death. But this Jedi is saying, no, I have the opportunity to show you that the Jedi really are about peace. And given the opportunity that they have here to strike him down, and they don't, that begins to show him that maybe there is a form of strength in the Jedi that does not exist within the Sith, and that clearly appeals to him greatly.
I accept your offer. I'm too wounded to aid you, but I will surrender to your people. Now hurry. Save this planet.
This is one of my favorite scenes in the Jedi Knight storyline, and really one of my favorite scenes overall in any of the class storylines. I hope that by taking a closer look at this scene, you've gained a greater appreciation for it, and maybe gained a little more insight into Lord Praven as a character, as I find him to be a unique character in the game, and a little more curiosity about the Jedi Knight and Sith dichotomy and some of their ideals and how they play against each other. How it's not even just black and white, it's not even just black and white and gray, but there are some other sort of shades mixed in there that we see through Lord Praven. If you have any suggestions for other scenes in Bioware games that you would like me to take a closer look at, leave a comment down below and I'd be happy to consider doing some additional analysis on them. As always, thank you for listening, thank you for watching, Masaranis, and until next time.